Courtney, welcome to our native plant series that we're doing this month. We're really excited to have you here to talk with us about native plants and your role with native plants. So thank you for agreeing to do this. Thank you for sharing your photos with us. I'm excited to share both what you're doing, your perspective on native plants, and some of your photos that you've got with folks that are interested in incorporating native plants into their landscape.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
We will start. I would love for you to introduce yourself and explain a little bit about your business's role in promoting native plants.
Sure. So I wear a lot of hats. I am the owner operator for Native Lands Llc. We're based out of Lawrence, and I'm also the ecologist for Native Lands. I also teach field botany for KU and sit on a bunch of boards for nonprofits, and I'm just sort of everywhere you look, there I am.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about Native Lands LLC.
Sure. So we are, the 5-word answer is we're an ecological restoration firm that we help nonprofits, municipalities, private landowners to understand what they have growing on their land and to help them meet their goals, which are typically going to be restoring back to native habitat. Sometimes though, we're helping people with creative use of native plants. Like yesterday, we were meeting with a client who's planting an elderberry farm, which is a really interesting use of native plants and something we support fully. So creative situations, creative problem solvings with native plants, basically. And all based on community outreach and public education.
Very good. Cool. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about why native plants are so hardy and so well adapted to our ecosystem here in the Midwest, why they're a good consideration for people if they're wanting to create a more functional landscape. So in your experience, what makes native plants, in your experience and in your education, what makes plants uniquely adapted for our landscapes?
So huge question, huge answer, right? And it only grows more complicated as we sort of observe our climate changing in our own lifetimes, right? But what makes them so really strong, so just really tough species, is that they've been adapting to this scenario, this climate for thousands of years. So the prairie species have been in place for 13 to 20,000 years, working on how to deal with every variable that this region can throw at them. So my master's research was focused really heavily on herbivory, or the damage that herbivores do to prairie plants. But it's really cool to see how they respond to animal damage. But it also, I do a lot of work with how plants respond to prescribed fire, how plants respond to drought and flood scenarios. And native plants are just really better equipped. Their toolboxes, their genetic toolboxes are better equipped to handle what Kansas and Missouri can throw at them than other plants are typically.
Yeah. So what are some of those variables that get thrown at some of these plants that, that we see unique or adaptation to, things that they're well equipped to deal with?
Right. The good question. A lot of gardeners are going to be familiar with some of these variables. So when I talk about drought and flood, you feel that at home, right? How much you're having to water, or when you panic when it's been raining for 5 days straight. Native plants handle those scenarios really well, especially if you've chosen the right plant for the right place. So, wet spot in the yard or wet spot on your land, using wetland plants that are native to our space. Those are the plants that can handle inundation of water for several days or weeks or even months if necessary, versus using the prairie plants in really dry, really hot spaces, because that's their norm. If you try to plant your typical imported plant from another country, that's going to be a little more comfortable than Kansas and Missouri. You're going to see you're going to have to work a lot harder to take care of those plants. Some of the other variables, like I said, damage from animals. I feel like I get that question about native plants all the time. I have a lot of deer. How do I protect my plants from deer? And my response is always, don't try to protect your plants from the native animals of Kansas and Missouri, right? Plant enough for everyone. And those plants actually respond really interestingly to animal damage. So native sunflowers, for instance, my research showed that the deer damage to sunflowers actually made them bloom more and didn't dampen their ability to reproduce and spread. In fact, it increased their ability to reproduce and spread. So welcome the animals into your garden. That's part of why we do native gardening. And the same can be, said for caterpillar damage, bird damage to plants. These plants know these animals and respond in unique ways to that damage. And then native plants are really great at anchoring and healing soil, helping to heal nutrient issues if you choose the right plants for that situation. Standing water, all sorts of things. Bare spots in your lawn that just won't grow. Native plants are fantastic healers.
So I'm hearing from you a lot of things that not only make these plants hardier, right? Like they're just able, but they also are adding to a more functional landscape. So you're providing food, you're providing habitat, you're mining nutrients out of the soil. So it's really a win-win, right? You as a gardener, absolutely. There's less to think about, less to stress about, maybe less coddling that you have to do, but you're also providing such a great ecosystem benefit because you do have that added functionality of these guys.
100% true. And I mean, I could teach a whole semester of all the different ways native plants provide for us and how we might provide for them, provide space for them and provide patience with them. And I think when it comes to gardening, which I think a lot of your viewers are coming from that perspective, it's all about choosing the right species for the right space. Most of folks' frustration with native plants is just choosing something that either we really wanted, but you're planting in the wrong spot. That makes the plant sort of struggle, or choosing a really, really sensitive plant or a really, really aggressive plant whose job might not be to be in your garden, but to be in a prairie. So it's all about knowing what you're doing and pre-planning, I think. Yeah. But these plants, I really do strongly believe our native plants can do anything if you choose the right ones.
I think so. And I think that's, it's a little bit of a perspective shift, thinking, okay, like I've got this space in my garden. I want to fill it with this purple flowering, summer blooming, well, right. That might not be the exact plant in the exact spot. So you do have to be a little bit more intentional about where you place things, because you can't just always strictly go for aesthetic. Otherwise, you probably will be coddling those plants long again.
100%. I think the typical person, and I can't say I've never done it. I grew up going to a garden center and saying, what am I going to buy today? I just want to pick something that's beautiful to me. Mm-hmm. And it was never about what's appropriate. It was, what do I want and how can I make it fit? I think native plants, if you design native gardens that reflect or are inspired by our native ecosystems, you're going to have better success. So what ecosystem is your yard, right? Yeah. And work within that ecosystem. Don't try to force something that doesn't work. Exactly. I think that's where most of our frustration comes from.
Got to work as a team with your
That's
plant.
Right. That's right.
Okay. And then final question for you, Courtney. Why are native plants a good choice when we're thinking about building a landscape that's going to be more suited for an unpredictable growing seasons? We're seeing a lot more fluctuation and temperature changes. So this is not a dramatic picture. I know this was a controlled burn that you sent me, and I just thought it was so impressive and cool that I wanted to include it.
Right.
So this is not.
It looks a little bit like what's going on?
Yeah.
This is our everyday. This is prescribed burning, and I could talk about that some other time. Though there are a few other folks you could talk to about that.
Not technique.
I think this is a great question to round up our conversation with today. I'm spending a lot of time, especially working with local small farmers and people who grow food at home, talking about how native plants as food, native plants as medicine, and native plants really to stabilize and protect soil, especially in food production spaces, and how important they are in those roles. But I think native plants, like we've been saying, are uniquely equipped to handle some of the roller coaster of weather that we're expected to be experiencing as the climate changes. And that's going to be true wherever, viewers, wherever you're coming from, whether or not you, wherever you stand on climate change. Things are changing, no matter what's going on, no matter what the cause is, and we have to be prepared to handle those scenarios. And the more you can embrace the plants that are best equipped to handle the roller coaster, the more easy life will be. Less watering, less fertilizing, less replanting, perennial landscapes. It's going to save you a lot of soil, save you a lot of time, save you a lot of water, and using drought tolerant and flood tolerant plants where it's appropriate, it's going to save you a lot of time. And I think embracing it even further and starting to learn how you might use native plants as part of your kitchen cabinet, as part of your medicine cabinet. Go as deep as you want to go. We are only 200-300 years removed from folks who were using the prairie as everything. So I like to think creatively about how I can connect with these plants and share experiences with them, and also how we can benefit from each other, because the sky is really the limit. And we are facing some really tough natural disasters, in our future. The more we anchor this soil, the more we protect it, the better off we'll be.
Thank you, Courtney.